In a way, like the NLE is the office now.
Whereas in the past, you had to rely on people typically arriving in person.
Yeah, it lets someone like a producer check in on the progress of work without interrupting the work. We always talk about the verticals.
Hi, we're back. Craig Wilson and Ray Thompson from Avid with another episode with some of the people making the media. As always, thanks a lot for joining us, and we really hope you're enjoying this new season. Remember, you can always leave a comment and even better, a like on any of our episodes, and follow us to get notified when new episodes are out on your podcast platform of choice. Now, Ray, who's our guest this time around?
Hey, Craig, thank you. Yes, our guest today is Brian Chahley from Streamwell. Streamwell is a really cool company. They make a review and approval application that's very powerful. We met Brian maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, and I was really impressed with what he had already built. So he took his application, turned it into a very powerful extension in Media Composer, and what it allows for is for users in Media Composer to collaborate virtually with anyone at any time. And what's cool about it is it's all browser based, so viewers can securely view anything happening in the timeline via a secured browser link, and then they can basically start watching and collaborating. There's also tool sets in there that allow you to not only put in text, right, and basically make comments about what it is you're seeing at the time, all time stamped, of course, which ultimately land right in the timeline in Media Composer in real time. Like as soon as you make a comment, it lands in the timeline for the editor to see, so they can go back and refer to that anytime. But you can also remotely play back the playback in Media Composer. So if I'm sitting on the other end of a session, Craig, with you, I could actually take over the session and control play, rewind, and so on, and do the whole thing right within that browser. So it's super impressive. And then the other cool part of it is if you wanted to brand it as your own, say, post-production facility or company, you can also do that too. And it looks like it's just part of an extension of your own brand. So there's some really cool tools in there, and it's really exciting to see it inside of Media Composer. And Brian is so knowledgeable. He's been around for a long time, streaming guru for sure, and certainly an SRT expert and a Media Composer expert. So it'll be an exciting discussion for sure.
Yeah, that's great. And thanks for that, Ray. So we're going to dive into it. But one of the great things I always think about the podcast is it lets us find out a bit more about the people as well as the technology. So let's get a bit of Brian's backstory first and his route from music all the way into the world of technology.
I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I was born here in the mid-late 80s to some artsy parents. My dad was a jazz saxophone player. My mother played flute and piano. So I was around the arts from a very young age. But sort of uniquely, I was also around technology from a very young age because from his career in the arts, my dad started one of the first Apple resellers in Canada. So there were a lot of Macs coming through. And by the time I was 4 or 5 years old, there were a couple of Mac Pluses. I remember sitting in the living room, and they just had whatever apps the client had installed on them. But a couple of those apps happened to be Macromedia Director. If you remember, it was, you could draw, and then it would give you an onion skin, onion skin, like for animating frame by frame. And HyperCard, which let you sort of design your own interactive slideshow style apps and had a bit of light scripting. So, as a 5, 6 year old, I wasn't moving mountains in these, but it was enough to discover. And then I too got into music from there. I became a trumpet player, got into jazz myself. I actually went to school in California at University of the Pacific. And then came back and lived in New York. I spent years living in the US, and it was quite an adventure. But it's funny, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And so I came back to technology. I moved back to Canada. I started working with my dad. He had a system integration company at that point doing network storage, media management. And it was there that I got into the media management software CatDV. They were based out of the UK at the time, and we connected because I was attending things like NAB and some of these other shows, meeting these folks, and we were doing CatDV projects with the company I was working with. So that sort of led me into the industry. And it was this interesting combination of I had this background in music and the arts, a lot of experience in video, and was starting to do these video workflows for folks.
You talked about going to NAB, working with Cat DV. How did that
Right.
lead you to where you are now?
So getting into that experience of working with all these different Cat DV customers, doing all of these media workflows that all sort of had a little bit to do with the creative side as well, was a huge piece of experience. At the same time, I was freelancing as a videographer and was just getting into live streaming in general. And so, in 2020, obviously a lot of things changed overnight, and I had to start working sort of remote AV for online events. And so at the time, we didn't have much available, right? We had Zoom was sort of, there was a big boom of Zoom. Teams even was just getting started. There were a few other platforms. None of them were great for sharing video. And I had some clients in the medical space. They wanted to share really detailed videos of, surgeries and statistics and all sorts of things. And so, it quickly became evident that there needed to be a better solution for easily sharing live video, whether you're in a live meeting or you just want to send someone a link or make it easy. And that's sort of where Streamwell was born. On the Cat DV side, they gave me a very easy point to jump off when they sold the company over to Quantum. And so I just sort of naturally moved on, did my own thing with Streamwell. And that was 5 years ago. We actually released Streamwell 5 years ago.
So from starting at that point, you talked there about looking at some different types of applications, and we'll maybe come back to talk about that because I think it's an interesting area. But how did you then get into sort of developing a tool that would solve challenges for the media business specifically?
So my sort of side gig around live streaming let me sort of witness a lot of the challenges that they were trying to solve. There were a lot of things where they would hire a video crew and they'd say, okay, yeah, we want to stream this. And we would always there was always this issue of platform where at the time it was like, okay, if you're going to stream something, it's got to be on YouTube or Facebook. That was sort of the chicken or fish of live streaming at the time. And so it became evident that there needed to be a neutral platform, something that could be branded for the company that they're using, something that wasn't going to inject a bunch of ads or third-party tracking and things like that into the viewership experience. And so it just became very clear there needed to be something, and I started building it. That was the pandemic project that sort of became this runaway thing that turned into Streamwell.
So for people who perhaps have never heard of it,
Yeah.
Brian, what does Streamwell actually do? Sum it up and tell us all about it.
So what is Streamwell? Streamwell gives companies a virtual live screening room that they can run on premise or in a cloud of their choosing. And it lets them stream professional live video at sub-second latency. So that's with no delay. The issue a lot of folks faced when they went into the pandemic was, okay, we have to do our live review sessions. We used to have client suites, right? People would come, sit down, and they'd serve you a particular roast of coffee. They'd set the lighting just right. They'd have a beautiful couch, and that sort of disappeared. And so we had to take that experience online. If you remember, in the early ages of the pandemic, this was not a great experience. So Streamwell makes it a great experience for companies who want to be able to easily share high quality live video between their editors and producers or clients or really any eyes on earth.
So it's really about breaking down those barriers, if you like,
Yeah.
of location. Because one of the things, of course, within Avid that we've seen within, really since the pandemic is, there's a lot more remote workflows, a lot more people working in different locations, taking advantage of talent in different locations. Is that kind of one of the challenges you think it solves?
Yeah, the spread out of talent that has occurred ever since basically people stopped going into one centralized office. So the workflows when the pandemic hit became far more asynchronous, right? It used to be, oh, I need feedback on this or that. I could yell down the hall and there was a producer two doors that way or a colorist two doors that way. You could ask a question. So then it became this thing of, okay, let's export our entire timeline or something, upload it to a third party service, send a link, wait for feedback, and the feedback cycles became longer and longer. So the first challenge that it solves is it brings back synchronous work. I think people who are doing this on a professional level, the kind of video quality you get in like a browser or a meeting software, you can't do an edit or a color session on that. Not realistically. So it basically lets companies get back to doing this stuff live the way they used to in client suites. Beyond that, it helps with the ownership issue of live video, right? If you're streaming on, Zoom or to a social platform like YouTube or Facebook, I mean, first of all, the quality is not going to be as good. There's always going to be a privacy concern because there's a chance that that video could get in front of eyes it wasn't meant for. Not to mention, there's the advertising, third party content promotion, third party branding. Now, when you're streaming to these platforms, it's very likely that you're training AI models. It's all sorts of things. So we solve for all that stuff by letting companies own the whole widget. They can take this entire platform where they'd normally be dependent on some external service, bring that in house, have their own branding on it, and run it, the way you would run any other local system with that sort of confidence that you can just sort of use it all the time.
One of the things that you were talking about was the efficiencies that you can also realize because of the fact that you can basically do virtual review sessions uh, in a very simple way now with Streamwell. Whereas in the past, you had to rely on people typically arriving in person, which limited your ability to really make modifications based on feedback. So, do you find that people see that as a real benefit?
Totally. Having the ease of being able to, whether you're talking to someone on the telephone, we could be on some meeting platform we know or one we don't know, that ability to just pop somebody a link and say, hey, look at this. What do you think of what you see right now? It's incredibly powerful. Absolutely.
Excellent. And so when you kind of look at the media landscape, Brian, and you look at everything that's going on, and you think about, for the longest time, it felt like there was really no significant changes happening in media, right? There was the shift to HD, felt like for 20 years, that's all anybody talked about at trade shows and events. And then you look at the last probably 10 years plus, and just, the amount of changes happening and continues to happen is really just incredible. Can you talk a little bit about how how basically Streamwell helps address some of the challenges and maybe just outline some of the big challenges that you've seen from your perspective, having had the experience you've had so far in this business?
So, as far as the challenges the business faces right now, yes, it would be an understatement to say that the times are simply changing. It's an upending. I think it's what's happening. The first business issue is that attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. Young people are moving away from mainstream content providers. You ask the average young person, you think of like when I or we were younger, you'd come home and you'd flip on, this major network or that major network and watch their after school programming and all their ads and everything. It's a much less linear answer now. I think it's young people are going more towards, it's not just young people really, it's like everybody's going more towards spending that same amount of time scrolling reels on social media. And I think we will see more and more of a shift to people deciding their own adventure, so to speak. We can't ignore the elephant in the room that is AI. And I think a lot of people are going to just choose to watch their own AI generated content or that of their friends. So the amount of competition for attention in the industry is going to be an issue. I think Streamwell solves for that a little bit. Even the competition for attention within a workspace. Now it's so much harder to squeeze 8 hours of productivity out of a day because it feels like we've got so many people reaching into our lives via Slack and email and things. There's a lot of distractions, and so it is nice that we offer a really nice minimal user interface with distraction free environment. Again, you're not going to have things like ads or interstitials popping up. and it doesn't try to make the thing into your whole meeting platform. So we provide a really simple sort of like cut through the cut through the stuff experience and get right to the video. Um, about the media business in general, though, I think we need to acknowledge that they've taken, the big players have taken a throw spaghetti at the wall approach with the content in the last few years. You think of a player like Netflix, where they've produced, hundreds of shows, saw what stuck, they were happy to kill half of them in the middle. And I think that's a really good testament to where our attention spans are at these days. Um, and things like the Warner deal, it's only an indication of this sort of consolidation and downsizing. And so with this downsizing, this is not all doom and gloom. I think the indie market's going to thrive. I think that the value for real human content is going to rise, but production is going to become a bit more of a boutique thing, which means that your traditional models of people going into work at a production facility, that's going to change. That every production facility that wants to stay relevant, they're going to have to reach further out for their talent and connect with people that are not just down the hall, but maybe on the other side of the continent. So solutions like Streamwell are going to help companies bring that communication in-house, allow them to have those channels of broadcasting their video or their work between various eyes and screens in the company. Yeah. I think corporate video is going to have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to talent out of this. And you're already seeing this. There's so much of the creativity is shifting over to corporate video. I think it's a really interesting trend as well.
One thing that you mentioned there, Brian, was about the simplicity of the tool. And I think that's a really interesting area to explore, because I think, one thing I've talked about for a long, long time is what I see as the democratization of technology, really enabled because, everybody now has, a smartphone. Everyone has a really, really powerful computer that sits in their pocket, but they're looking for those, simple experiences. They're not looking necessarily for complexity. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, Streamwell exists as a panel in Media Composer. So talk about how you see that simplifying the kind of workflow and enabling really no break in that creative flow, because I think that's something else that people talk about. They want tools that feel natural and part of what their day-to-day workflow is.
So as far as simplification goes, until recently, anything that allowed you to stream live, in a way, it was oversimplified or overcomplicated. Where you had something like an easy platform like Zoom or Teams, sure, you're going on there and you're live streaming, but it's not professional quality. Fine for communication, not fine for working, right? Um, and so there were solutions that existed that could do that, but they're all too complicated. And so with what Avid has made available in terms of the extensions program, the APIs, and just their general developer support program, it's sort of this perfect place for things to sit, because we can make a panel that sits in Media Composer where people are already going to work and spending their days. In a way, like the NLE is the office now, right? So because we can make this panel that sits in there so easily, in a way, it allowed us to make an easy button for streaming. And what also helps is that Avid, of all the big players, you guys are the only ones who are taking live streaming seriously. I don't mean to rock the boat too much with that statement, but you look at the other NLEs and how they've adopted live streaming. Either they pretend it doesn't exist, or in cases where they do implement it, it's locked down to their proprietary technology. Or in other cases, they've just done sort of a half implementation and it's sitting there. It's not really useful to anyone. So Avid, it's sort of this perfect storm of, you guys took live streaming out of the app seriously. You gave developers tools to actually build useful components, and you set up this program that lets us do co-promotion and have discussions like this. So that allows us to sort of find that perfect middle ground and bring that easy button to avid users.
But the question I was going to ask
Yeah.
is about just give us some example of kind of sample workflows from within Media Composer. Is it just review and approval? Is it more than that? Is it doing things like color viewing and things like that as well? What are the key workflows that you would see them for the Streamwell panel and Streamwell extension in Media Composer?
So the review and approval is sort of the low hanging fruit, right? There's so many use cases. I think anybody who uses Media Composer is going to encounter that use case where they're saying, okay, I'm working on this thing. I want to show people, but I don't want to export it and upload it somewhere to show them. So it solves for that and sort of closes those feedback loops. There have been some really cool other workflows as well, specifically around broadcast. Broadcasters use Avid Media Composer and Avid's suite of utilities as a broadcast tool as well. And so, for instance, we had a company in Italy who was using it to broadcast stuff that they were cutting live in Media Composer out to a film festival, on the other side of the country. Um, and we've had other customers use it for things like a broadcaster using it to send return feeds to the field. So they would, use it like a loop back interface for a reporter to be able to speak back to the studio. There was a fire department that they would send out drones and they would do live streaming from the drones so that the folks, the first responders, wouldn't just have to talk on the phone to ask what they were seeing. They could actually see the live view of the drones on their phones. There was we have a company doing game testing. So they record a whole bunch of people playing their games. And because of Streamwell, they can give really simple access to that. And so this stuff, it can tie in with Media Composer, but it also, just as a sort of soft video router, organizations that use live video, they love this as a solution.
Is it the case then that there's lots of opportunity within what are classed as adjacent markets to the traditional broadcast market that you're looking at as well?
Oh, absolutely. So things, we always talk about the verticals, in education, for the ability to take a class that's happening in one room. Now every room has screens, so to be able to easily move a video of what's happening in one classroom to other classrooms without having to deal with a third party service to do that. In medical, of course, we've already done some POCs in things like surgical theaters. Uh, and then really any industry where they're working with video in any context, having that ability to easily share that video out with just a link, it makes it a really powerful thing for companies. So yeah, we think the most successful implementations of this will be where, yes, they're using it in Avid for their editing workflows, but it also can go beyond that and become really a piece of video infrastructure for the companies overall.
And Brian, there's a level of customization you can do here, right? In terms of, you mentioned branding, but you can, basically customize the look and feel even of Streamwell for your own organization.
Yeah, this is funny because this might be a double-edged sword for me, but coming from that background of the arts and creativity, starting out with that software like HyperCard, all these things where it's roll your own, do it yourself. Cat DV and the customizing media asset management. One thing I certainly learned along the way is that there's never going to be a one size fits all workflow or deployment. I think companies that do it that way are limiting themselves. Avid's a great example of that, actually, because Avid is really one of the only pieces that is sold as systems still. Many of the other guys have sort of devolved into, it's just one app and it's just a subscription. And if it works for you, great. And if it doesn't, great. They'd rather go for the volume of the every user, where Avid is for the professionals, the specialists, the very particular companies that need to build out infrastructure. Not to say that it doesn't also, I mean, obviously you have the Media Composer Ultimate subscription is cheaper than Adobe now, for an individual editor who wants to make their way up to these big companies. But um, anyhow, this is all coming around to say uh, the do-it-yourself, the customization, and the ability to fit into these high-level integrations uh, was a piece of that needed to be there from day one. So you can, of course, put your own logo on the solution. You can change out the look and feel of the colors. You can customize your own CSS. You can turn on or off the features that you want. Problem with a lot of cloud only subscriptions these days is that um, big companies will subscribe, or people will subscribe, and one day they'll log in and that button is down there now, and that button doesn't exist anymore, and that button used to do this but now it does that. So with Streamwell, we give a lot more of that control back to the user, by not forcing them to upgrade their software if they don't want to, or allow them to customize it and keep just the features they want. So, Ray, to your point, what that results in is that every customer has a really sort of bespoke version of Streamwell without us having to do a lot of heavy lifting on the customization side, because it was really built for those sort of knobs and buttons to be worked by the customer. There are a lot of people that use Streamwell that don't even know it's called Streamwell. They don't even know what it is. It's just this amazing thing that we have, and this is what we use. We click this button, and it shows up there, and I send you the link, and boom, we're working. So that lack of friction, once people start using it, it becomes this sort of thing they don't know how to live without. We had an animation studio as an example. They were with the competing service. It was a great service, but it was a little expensive, and so they only had 5 slots to do these live sessions in. But they had 30 editors. And so Streamwell, we got in there, and after we onboarded all their editors, they're in their 3rd year. When these people come in the morning, they turn on their stream. They don't even know why. They just turn on their stream, and the whole company feels connected right away. When we're doing upgrades for them, we'll always we'll schedule the downtime, but then as soon as we turn the thing off for a few minutes, they'll start getting emails like, "Where's my Streamwell? I need my Streamwell." So it's just great. It becomes this sort of equalizer. There's this tool that you used to have to be like a broadcaster, a huge company to have access to these kinds of capabilities. And now we find we're getting into little studios even, and they just come in, they turn this thing on, and they just leave it on all day. I think the good tagline for that is it lets someone like a producer check in on the progress of work without interrupting the work.
My other question, Brian, would be how does it scale, right? If you're a medium-sized organization or a large organization, can you just talk a little bit about how Streamwell can sort of scale up or down to meet those demands?
Yeah, so the flexibility of not running just one centralized platform, it means that Streamwell, you can get a little bit of Streamwell here, a little bit there, a lot there. It's not uncommon for us to see companies who want to put it in a few different places, right? It is just from a technical perspective, it is a server application, right? So companies would have a server or a few different servers that they use around the organization that can receive and play back these live streams. That's essentially what Streamwell does for you there. So as far as how a company would choose to scale it out, sure, you could just throw one giant system at the whole company, and that could scale up to thousands of viewers or hundreds of streams. But I think the more strategic way is to use it as such, strategically, to say, okay, this department, they have a Streamwell, and we're going to use it this, and this way. And then over here, we're going to put Streamwell in for that, and that. That ability to customize and sort of cut it down to just the pieces you need. Make it really flexible for sort of a multi-deployment within a company. We have some customers that they don't actually do the live. I mean, they do the live as a form of ingest, but they're using it more as a solution for recording than for live broadcasting. We have customers who they do the live, but then people actually go in and just mark up with comments and annotations the recordings after the fact. So having that flexibility, and to bring it back to Ray's question of how it would scale within an organization, um, it would either scale in the form of we got a lot of people doing a lot of streams to a lot of viewers, or we're going to strategically place this thing around the organization because it can fulfill a lot of different roles.
Exciting, things that you're able to do, but technology never stays the same. Everything develops and moves on. So can you tell us a little bit about some of your future plans? What are the kind of exciting areas that you're working on to take already what you can do, but to develop it further?
So we're super excited about obviously this. We just launched our partnership and integration with Avid, um, and so for this coming year, there's sort of three areas of interest. I would say our chief area of interest is fleshing out or enhancing the Avid integration. As we start to collect feedback from customers, see the directions that we can go with the tools that Avid is continuing to develop. They've got this SDK. By the way, if you're a third-party developer and you haven't looked at the Avid SDK, do look at it. It's kind of amazing to see something that, in a way, it's a living, breathing thing, because as people are adopting it, they are continuing to put more and more capabilities. And so that will ultimately let us bring more of the Media Composer experience out to a web browser. So that's, a lot of our goal for this year is to, again, bring more of the Media Composer experience out to the web browser, uh, taking steps towards things like self-driven review sessions. Imagine that, where a client can go on and the editor doesn't even have to sit there. We actually just revealed late last year a remote control feature where you can control Media Composer from the other side. So you don't have to sit there and say, hit play, hit stop, go back 5 seconds, things like that. It can let people do that and send the feedback themselves. Besides that, the other areas of interest are better human connections. It has been a pretty common feature request where people want to, even though Streamwell is really, I feel it's really best used alongside whichever communication platform. People want the communication platform in there too. So we're looking at putting voice, possibly video chat features as an option. Again, the nice thing about our approach with Streamwell is we know that not everyone's going to want every feature. So whatever we put in to Streamwell, it's not just going to show up one day on everybody's screen. Users will be able to opt in or out of any feature they want. So that's nice. It allows us to deliver some of the things people are asking for without sort of, let's say, putting a burden or cheapening the experience for other users who might not want that stuff. And then the last area of interest for this year is better support for the asynchronous workflows. I know we exist to sort of replace them, but there have been a lot of folks who say, okay, live is great. I want to upload files and let people review and get back later. Like there's services out there that do this. So that ability to sort of have your own one of that service, which I'm not going to name, running internally, it could be a very powerful place to take things there. So those are for this year, better communication between people within the platform, the better asynchronous workflow support if you do want to upload some stuff and have people mark it up later, and then just continuing, not letting off the gas with the Avid integration. Not at all.
Excellent. Well, that was great. And knowing Brian, he's not going to take his foot off the gas. He is continuing to develop cool new features. He adds to it all the time. Just really impressive. One of my favorite. I know I'm saying this all the time now, but it's one of my favorite extensions, and that's for real. And I'm really excited to see what he does next.
Yeah, and I really love that phrase he used where he said that the NLE is the office now, and so
Really
speaking
is.
of the NLE, on our next episode, let's find a link into the next episode, we're going to look into how you can get the maximum performance out of your hardware to really accelerate your workflows. Exciting stuff, Ray.
That's right, Craig. And to do that next, we're going to be talking to Intel, and specifically we'll be talking to Brajinder Bharti from Intel, who is going to talk about what they're doing as it relates to DNX and DNX support across Intel platforms, and how that's going to enable some amazing workflows in various different applications, certainly Media Composer, but others too. And it's going to be an exciting discussion. I really look forward to that one.
Great. Let's have a sneak peek.
We are pushing our boundaries with the hardware innovation.
We're getting better visual quality out of the gate, better performance.
Whether it's for newsmakers, broadcasters, these are workhorses. They are all being accelerated.
It has been an amazing journey that started small and became something that is transforming the entire creator industry.
That literally turns into dollars, right?
We're going to get into lots of really great detailed information about DNX, DNX support, DNX codecs, sort of the evolution of DNX really from 3.0 to 4.0, which is super exciting, big, huge upgrade. And I think you're really going to be excited to learn more about it. And for now, I would say, Craig, for you and I and for Making the Media, that's all for now. And we look forward to talking to you again very soon.